Anna, would you like me just to start, or I can't remember if there's an intro ahead of time or not?
You're ready to start, Larry, whenever you're good.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar. This is the third in the last 4 or 5 months that I've had the pleasure of doing with NSHSS and Hannah Colquitt from there. Thank you, Hannah, for arranging these, and I hope tonight's participants enjoy what they have to hear, and also we'll think about questions they may like to ask, because I will certainly allow for time for that later. And Hannah is also has offered to post a link in the chat and perhaps elsewhere to a book that relates to my topic tonight. So if this topic does interest you, I explore it in much more detail in a short book. I think it's only about 100 pages, called Are We Good Enough for Liberty? And if you want a hard copy, you can buy one very cheaply, but it's available for free on the FEE website. You can just read it right off online. And Hannah will be including the link to that in the chat. Well, tonight's topic is liberty and character. And what I hope to accomplish is to explain to you why those two things are so strongly connected, in fact, that I don't think you could have one without the other. They are sort of like two sides of the same coin. And I hope that'll become clear. But I should begin by certainly pulling liberty out of the discussion here and spending a few minutes describing what we're talking about here. You know, there's hardly a person in the world, if you ask them, do you support liberty, who would say no. Almost everybody would say, oh, liberty, yeah, that's a good thing. I'm glad I have some and I'd like to have more. Very few people would say, no, I want less liberty. I don't like liberty. I'd rather be controlled, or rather be a slave or a serf or a subject of some dictator. Nobody says that. And yet you look around the world and you'll see that there are an awful lot of people who don't have liberty. And certainly in history, that has been the case, excuse me, more often than not, that liberty is rather rare in history. It's a relatively recent development in human existence. I mean, there have been brief flashes of liberty in the past. For a time, ancient Greece, Athens in particular, had a considerable degree of liberty. The Romans did for a time. But most people who have ever lived on this planet, including most who live here today, could not honestly say that they live in an environment characterized by considerable liberty. Most people have been subjects or serfs or slaves, or just lived in a system where they had to be in constant fear of the people with political power, who control the army and the police and so forth. So maybe part of the reason for that is that not everybody understands what liberty is. They have a favorable impression of it, but I wonder how many can actually define it and know it when they see it. Liberty is a condition in which, because of the environment around you, the institutions that you face, you have considerable, now I realize there's a gray area here, but you have considerable latitude in deciding how your life is going to go. The opposite of that is somebody else is telling you at every turn how to live your life. In that case, you would hardly say you are really you're, because it's somebody else living their life through you instead of you living your life. Liberty means that you get to make choices. And those of us who believe in it very strongly also argue that when you have liberty, you should also accept responsibility. Liberty doesn't mean the freedom to do anything, because certainly when you act to take away someone else's liberty, some other innocent person, when you try to take their property or take their lives or tell them what to do, you're violating their liberty. And in such a world, of course, everybody's liberty is ultimately endangered. The last thing any of us who favor liberty should want is for people to get away with sacrificing somebody else's liberty for some pet cause they may have. So liberty is a condition. It's an environment, and in which you have a lot of choice. The major decisions, as well as most of the little ones, are up to you as to how you want to live your life, where you want to live it, where you want to work. It's a condition that most Americans sort of take for granted because we've had it, or a considerable degree of it, right from our very founding. But we're rather exceptional in that regard in the history of mankind. Not many peoples, as I say, have really experienced liberty. Now, there are different kinds of liberty. People often think of it in terms of personal freedoms, and that's an element of it. The decision what to wear today, or what ideology to embrace, or what lifestyle to embrace. Those are kind of personal liberties, but there's also economic liberty. And sometimes that gets shortchanged. Economic liberty means the right to create wealth, the right to exchange it with others, free trade, the right to sell or not to sell. I have economic liberty in my house in that I own it, or at least I have a mortgage that says I do, but I can also sell it when I want. And if somebody makes me an offer that I don't choose to accept, I don't have to accept it. That's a kind of economic liberty. We often call that free enterprise. And it implies things like the right to private property, to buy and sell, to create a business, to be entrepreneurial. All of those are economic liberties. Now, it's pretty easy to demonstrate that when people live in substantial liberty, they tend to be more prosperous than if they don't. A free society, or a society of liberty, is a society usually of productive people who invest, create wealth, employ people, and build enterprises. But a society of slaves cannot be very productive, because by very definition, being a slave means you don't get to make the important decisions in your life. You're told what to do. So if you've got a great idea and you would like to invest in it, or produce it and try to sell it in the marketplace, but you're a slave, you can't do that unless you get permission from the master. And that is offensive to anybody, I think, who appreciates what liberty is all about. Now, how do we argue for liberty? I mean, what if somebody came along and said, well, yeah, it's a high-sounding phrase, but actually, I think my plan for society is better than anybody else's, so we should make people live the way I want them to. We should ask questions of such a person right off the bat, like, well, what gives you the right? And if you get to tell other people what they can do, why don't I have that right? Why can't I tell you what to do? Of course, nobody has that right. We all come into this world at birth with an inherent right to be ourselves, to be free, to be who we are, so long as we do no harm to anyone else. That really is what it means to be human. To be human means to be the unique individual that each and every one of us is. If somebody else is telling you at every turn what to do, then you're not being you, as I say. You're living somebody else's life, who's living their life through you. So we can argue in favor of liberty in a number of ways. One way is to say it's the way we were born. It's what we were born for. If we were all robots that had to be programmed by some central planner, you wouldn't have much of an argument for liberty. But we're not made that way. Each of us is unique. Each of us has his own collection of traits and abilities and motivations and ambitions and so forth. There are no two people who have ever lived, as far as we know, who have been exactly the same in every respect. There's no reason to believe that anybody has ever been duplicated. So liberty really could come down to meaning that if you want to be who you really are, you've got to be free. Otherwise, you can't make the choices that reflect who you are. So liberty is important for a lot of reasons. Even though everybody says they want it, they would like to have it. Unfortunately, the world is cursed with lots of people who unfortunately don't have it because someone else has seized power, taken power, or uses power to dominate them. Well, the other half of this talk tonight is about character. And as I said at the start, I want to make the connection for you between liberty and character. And by character, I mean that cluster of personal traits that really define who you are, define your personality. We use that term in a lot of ways, that term character. Sometimes you hear people say of another person, they'll say, oh, he's a character. And when they say that, they usually mean, well, there's something eccentric or unusual, different, interesting about the other person. I don't mean it that way tonight. I mean character to describe the cluster of personal traits that define who you are. And more specifically, I want to talk about the traits of good character, because you can certainly have bad character. You know, somebody who robs banks or makes war on other people just to accumulate wealth, we'd hardly say they have good character. They have character, but it's bad character. I want to talk about the kind of character that is indispensable to a society of free people, to a society in which liberty is practiced. In fact, I would argue that liberty is the only social, economic, and political arrangement that requires that we live to high standards of character. That's part of the connection I am hoping to establish for you tonight, that they are so connected, liberty and character, that without liberty, we don't even know then if you have character, because your choices aren't really yours. And without character, you're probably not going to be free. You're not going to live in a society of liberty, because a society of people who have allowed their character to erode and who adopt things like stealing and other forms of disrespect of other people, they're not going to be a free people. Sooner or later, the chaos that results from all that will bring some strong man to power who will knock heads together and bring order out of the chaos. Historically, this connection between liberty and character is so strong that I am unaware of any civilization, any country that ever lost its character, as I will define it, those positive traits I've referred to. No country or civilization has ever lost its character and kept its liberties. They go hand in hand. Now, what do I mean by good, positive character traits? The kinds of traits that not only are indispensable to your personal success, but that are indispensable to society at large, and that will determine whether or not you live in a free society of liberty or in a slave society or some mix somewhere in between. Well, let me give you several character traits that I think are vitally important. They're not in any particular order of importance. You may rank them differently than the way I will list them. That's fine. But I think these are certainly among the 4, 5, or 6 most important character traits for a free society and for your personal success. The first trait is honesty. Honesty. A trait that is unfortunately in decline, it seems. There have been polls taken recently that suggest that for the first time in American history, Americans now believe that truth isn't objective, it is subjective. It's whatever you want it to be. And so that's why you hear these days something that I never heard when I grew up, phrases like his truth, her truth, as if, you know, that's different from the truth and somehow equally valid. Every time I hear someone refer to their truth or her truth or his truth, I want to say, well, is that the same as the truth? Because if it isn't, then it can't be a truth. Well, this goes to the basic core character trait of honesty, of elevating truth to a very high value in and of itself. a people who are committed to what's true, who are opposed to and try not to practice such negative traits as lies and dishonesty or theft. A society that really puts truth on a pedestal has a chance to be a free and a prosperous one. Let me give an example from personal experience of someone that I've always regarded, and it's now been, wow, almost 30 years since I met this person. But many years ago, I was going to Cambodia, a country in Southeast Asia that at the time had just been through a terrible 4.5 years of dictatorship under a communist dictatorship. And so I was expecting a society in tremendous need, and it certainly was. They were just now recovering from all that. But before I left my home then in Michigan for Cambodia, the local newspaper ran a story about my going to Cambodia and raising some medical supplies to take with me. And a woman called me and she said, "Oh, Mr. Reed, I understand from the paper you're going to Cambodia. Well, our church helped some Cambodian refugees, families, when they first came to the United States a few years back. And we helped them get established. And now they all live in different parts of the US, building families and homes elsewhere, but we stay in touch." And she said, every time they send anything back to their families in Cambodia, like just an envelope with a letter and some money, this woman said, it never gets there, or it gets there with the letter, but not the money. And so if you are willing, I know that these families that we are in touch with would love for you to take some letters with you addressed to their loved ones in Cambodia with some money in each envelope. Would you be willing to do that? If you can find those families, give them the letters and the money. And I said, I'd be happy to. And she also said, now, if you get to the last day of your visit there and find that you can't find anybody, well, don't come back with the money. At least give the money to needy Cambodians that you see and that you have reason to trust, but don't come back with the money. And I said, okay, I'll do my best. Well, 3 of the 4 families that I was to find, I was able to locate. I presented them with the letters addressed to them and the money, and they were incredibly grateful, tears in their eyes. But the 4th family lived quite a ways from the capital city, where my travels mostly took me. And I knew the day before I was to leave that I wasn't going to get there. So I had this 4th envelope with a letter in it and $200. Well, I was told not to bring the money back. So I had to look around and try to find somebody I thought really needed it. And that part wasn't hard to locate, but that I could trust would spend the money well. So there was a man who had been giving me rides in his rickshaw in the capital city much of the week I was there. And he spoke a little bit of English. He always had a broad smile, and I sensed that he was a good man, but very, very poor. And so I looked him up before I left, and he was usually found right outside the hotel. And I said, if you can take this letter with its $200 in the envelope to the family to whom it's addressed, you can keep $50 of it for the effort. Now, $50 at that time in Cambodia was about 6 months' average salary. It was a lot of money. And so he took it, and I said goodbye. And I didn't expect to ever hear anything further from him. I didn't, I remember thinking at the time, I'll be surprised if I ever even learn whether or not the family got the money in the letter. But about 6 months later, that woman who first called me and asked me to take the letters to Cambodia, she called me back all excited. And she said, Larry, I have a letter here from one of those Cambodian families now living in Minnesota. And they received a letter from that family that you couldn't find. And I have to read this paragraph to you. And in that paragraph, it read in part, thank you for the $200. Now, I know that was a long story, but the point was, here was a man who, if he'd kept it all for himself and never left town, he wouldn't have faced any consequences, certainly not for me or probably anybody else. But this guy had enough decency. He was honest as could be. He not only made the effort to get to that town where that family was, he gave them all $200. He didn't even keep the 50 I told him he could. I've often thought, wow, wouldn't you love to live in a world where people are that honest? Wow, you could make a deal with anybody, shake their hand, and know that they would follow through on it. Nobody would ever tell you a lie in such a world. Unfortunately, we don't quite live in that kind of world, but I've sort of personally celebrated that man, that Cambodian man, all these years since. So honesty is critically important. In the long run, even though being dishonest on occasion may seem to benefit you, in the long run, most of the time it catches up with you. And you want to be able to look back on your life someday, maybe the day before you check out, and be able to say that I was as honest, I was as committed to the truth as I could be once I came to understand how important it is. And it really defined my life. And it made me an effective person because people saw me as an honest person. Somebody who lives by lies and cheating and all that negative stuff, I just think that it's got a weigh on their conscience. And certainly they're not going to be people of great influence because as the rest of the world learns what they're all about, they're going to have an ever harder time. So in any event, I hope one of the points you get from this lecture tonight is that honesty is a pillar of good character. It's important to a free society. It's in fact indispensable to it. Can you imagine a society where nobody or most people don't care what the truth is, who think nothing of lying at the drop of a hat anytime they think it may give them some advantage? What would such a world be like? Would you like to live in such a world? I think it would be chaos. How could you count on anybody for anything if you thought, well, they could just as soon be lying to me as telling me the truth? We wouldn't want to live in such a world. And it would be chaotic. And out of the chaos, somebody would, as I mentioned it earlier, knock heads together and bring order out of the chaos. So honesty is critically important. A second attribute of strong character, indispensable to your success and a free society, is what I like to call intellectual humility. That's a mouthful, but what it really means is recognizing that as much as you may know, there's still a universe of knowledge out there that you don't know. Every now and then you run across people who think they are a know-it-all. They know what's best for you. They'd love to tell you at every turn what to do, how to live your life, because they know best. That usually doesn't go well. And yet there's a surprising number of people who behave that way, even if their own lives are a mess. They somehow think they know enough to straighten yours out. So if you think about it, the information that is out there about anything and everything is really, as far as we know, infinite. So you can go through life 60, 70, 80 years collecting PhDs if you want, and you may be a very smart person relative to many others, but you're still a babe in the woods. There's as much information, as much knowledge out there at the end of your life that you still don't know as there was at the start of your life. Now, people who are intellectually humble tend to be more introspective people. They're not so full of themselves that they think they know everything or know it better than you do. And so they tend to focus on a very constructive activity that we call self-improvement. Get more knowledge. And I know that most of the audience tonight are students. I like to tell audiences of students that I'm a student too, even though I'm 70 years of age. I don't want to ever stop learning because I still have a universe of infinite knowledge I don't know yet. if you take the opposite of that, somebody who's not intellectually humble, a know-it-all type, what are they like? Are they fun to be around? Somebody who is a know-it-all, they're probably going to be meddlesome, a nuisance, obnoxious. They are not going to be respectful of you because they think you know so much less than they do. That's not conducive to a positive environment where everybody can do better. So I wouldn't want to live in a society of know-it-alls and busybodies and condescending people who think they know more than they really do. So intellectual humility, it will help spark a lifelong search for knowledge and for learning that is a very healthy thing for a good person to have. Another character trait indispensable to liberty and to your success is responsibility. I briefly mentioned this a little bit ago, but responsibility means that you step up to the plate, so to speak. And if you make a mistake, you don't try to foist it on somebody else. You don't try to blame somebody else for it. You take ownership of it and you say, I want to learn from that mistake and try not to do it again. I'm going to take responsibility. Imagine just the opposite, a society of irresponsible people. What would that look like? You'd have people running all over the place, pointing the finger of blame at everybody else, even for their own mistakes. You'd have people saying, I'm entitled, give me something, you owe it to me, give me a bailout, give me a subsidy. And would you want to live in such a society? I've never met anybody yet who honestly would say, yeah, that's the kind of society. I'd like my neighbors to be that, always expecting me to give them something and willing to take the blame for my mistakes. Never met anybody who said they'd like anything like that. And yet the world is still full of irresponsible people. So my advice is don't be one of those. Be responsible. It's a great teaching tool. If you have children in the future, if you want them to be responsible, show responsibility yourself. Children especially, I think, learn by example. And if they see irresponsible parents, it's going to be hard for them to develop a responsible attitude toward life themselves if they're exposed to its opposite from day one. Another important trait is courage. Courage. Here, again, everybody says, oh yeah, I like courage. I'd like to have, I like to think I have it, or I'd like to have more of it, or I like people who have it. But there are a lot of people who don't. By courage, I mean the willingness to take a risk for things that are worth it. Willingness to be exposed to danger, not for silly or no reason, but rather when occasions arise that a good person has to be courageous in order to preserve the values he believes in. Could be his life, could be his property, could be his family. But we live in a dangerous world where people who are timid, who shrink from engagement, even with bad people, even with evil, they're not going to be around for long. There are just too many people who would be happy to take your life or take your property or do harm to your family if they thought they could get away with it and that you would not defend yourself. So be courageous. When you look at the history of great countries like the United States, you'll find it full of courageous people who, in many cases, put their lives on the line for things that they believed in. And I just can't imagine a timid people who run from every negative circumstance. I can't imagine them being a free people. They're ripe for the picking at the hands of others who will be happy to take their stuff. So courage, very important. Another attitude that we often forget is gratitude. Gratitude. I should define that because we kind of all of us have a sense of what it is, but think of it this way. Gratitude is the recognition that not all of the good things that have happened to you have been entirely of your own doing. Okay? Not all of the good things that have happened to you have been entirely of your own doing. We all are beneficiaries for which we should be grateful, of other people's good deeds, other people's responsibility, honesty, and so forth. We could be thinking of our parents who bestowed life to us and also nurtured us from an early age. That's something to be grateful for, especially if they did a good job. Gratitude, or having a grateful spirit, it turns out, is not only an important trait for success in life, it can actually add to your longevity of life. A few years ago, a bioethicist by the name of Emmons, Emmons, don't remember his first name, but his book is available on Amazon. If you type in Emmons and gratitude, I'm sure you'll find it. But he, in this book, reported on what his team of bioethicists found after doing intensive study of this attitude we call gratitude. And he reports in this book that having a grateful spirit can add as much as 7 years to your life. And, how was it expressed? If you have a grateful spirit, I think you'll find yourself saying thank you to people. You'll find yourself being encouraging of other people and they of you. Sometimes expressing gratitude is no more costly than just a smile and a thanks. And I can't tell you how many times that I thought somebody missed the opportunity. Maybe I was buying something from them, or I had just done something for them, and they couldn't bring themselves to say thank you. And, I can't think of any time that it ever prompted me to say anything negative to them. But in those occasions, I walked away feeling a bit empty. I thought, gee, if only they had said thank you, it would have made them feel better, and it would have made me feel better. And it doesn't cost any more than a breath, just saying thank you to someone. You'll find that people with a grateful spirit smile more often. People who don't have a grateful spirit tend to be angry. They're always talking about victims and victimology and oppressors. Everybody's either oppressed or they're an oppressor. Or, they're unhappy about everything. They don't face life stoically in terms of, hey, maybe I can't change it, but I can certainly learn from it and grow from it and do better, maybe even because of it. But if you have a negative attitude that you're always being victimized, nothing to be grateful for, I think that eats at you. And that I'm sure was a big factor in that research showing that the absence of a grateful spirit is costly to your mental attitude and perhaps even the length of your life. Now, if you've got all of these traits and you have them by the boatload, I think with few exceptions, there are other factors involved in personal success. You got to work on a lot of things, but if you've got all these things going for you because you've worked on your honesty, you've tried to be responsible, you're courageous when necessary, and you're grateful for the good things that have happened to you, I think you stand head and shoulders above a huge number of people out there, and you'll do better, you'll be more successful in life. And your society will be better off because of it. And liberty has a chance to flourish amongst a society of people of such high character. They have a great measure of all these traits combined into one. So in my life, I have tried to observe and learn from people that I thought were good examples of some or even all of these characteristics. And I've had the blessing of knowing quite a few. One of them was a man who passed away in 2015 at 106. He was the oldest person I ever knew. He saved almost 700 Jewish children from the Nazis in 1939, right before the war broke out, and was celebrated the world over for his heroic deeds. And he was a very humble person. I remember taking students to Britain where he lived. He was British. And I would always tell them, watch the documentary on YouTube about him before we go. And then, because he's the guy you're going to meet. And anytime a student would say, oh, Mr. Winton, Winton was his last name. You are such a hero. Well, being the humble man that he was, he would quickly say, oh, no, don't call me that. I just did what I could. But of course, we all knew that, no, he went beyond just what he could. He went the extra mile, many miles, to save those children at risk to himself. And so many people, about 6,000, in fact, are alive or were alive because of his action. He saved 669. Many of them went on in later life to have children, and they had children. And if you add all those numbers up, it's more than 6,000 people who either still are around or were because of the actions of this one man, Sir Nicholas Winton. I want to tell you, by the way, there's a new movie. I don't know when it's coming to the US, except to say it's in the early part of 2024. But it's about him, a brand new movie. There's already been a documentary about him, but a new movie with an all-star cast. You may know these names. Anthony Hopkins. He's the great British actor who will play Nicholas Winton in this new movie. It already debuted in Toronto, Canada, and I think is to appear in Britain in the next month or so. So it'll probably be in the US in the first quarter of 2024. But the title of the movie is One Life. One Life. If you go to YouTube now and type in One Life trailer, maybe throw in Winton in there in the search as well, you can see the trailer for it and see a snippet of the movie. But Nicholas Winton was one of those people I had the pleasure of meeting that I thought, wow, he had it all. And what a success he proved to be. Not only did he save all those lives, but he was very successful in his personal life, in his economic life. He retired a fairly well-off man and was a great philanthropist, giving to all sorts of causes, and just a genuinely wonderful person, a tribute to all those character traits that I've mentioned already. So I want to give you some time for questions. Let me work toward a conclusion by saying that being young people with your lives ahead of you by the decades, you are probably thinking about all the options that might be available to you. You may not yet have decided where you want to go in life, physically, in terms of location, or what you want to do. All that will come together, hopefully in due course and in good order. But I remember this one thing, that there's no better investment in you than investing in your personal character. It will pay off in bushels, and it's so costless to strive to be an honest person committed to the truth, to be known for that, to be a humble person, always seeking knowledge, not behaving as if you think you know it all, being responsible and learning from your mistakes and not trying to blame other people for them, being courageous when the time calls for it, like Nicholas Winton was, and having a humble and grateful spirit, saying a word of thanks when it's in order. All of those things and so many other aspects of character are the best investment you can possibly make. And it's, it doesn't cost anything more than a few thoughts, maybe a book or two, and certainly a personal commitment to the things that we all know, I think, are right, whether we practice them every day or not. So character is critically important to your success. You'll be amazed at how many doors it will open for you. If you become known as, wow, that you can take that person's word to a bank. That person means what he says what he means. That person stands for the truth and will defend it at all costs. That person has great courage and a humble spirit. If those things can be said of you in time, I can just about guarantee that lots of other wonderful things will be said about you, that he or she was a great success in life, good example. And for his children, her children, and for the rest of society. So invest in character. You'll never regret it. It'll change your life, and you can change the lives of others for the better if you've got character and show them the way. So thank you. And Hannah, if you'd like, I'm happy to go to questions now. And I think we do that by clicking on chat here. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, great. I see. Thank you, Hannah. You've also included a trailer for that movie, One Life. Okay. Sorry about my dog in the backyard, if you can hear him barking. He's got character, trust me.
I
Okay.
think we have 2 questions in the Q&A, Larry.
Yes, I see them. First one, just wondering, does liberty happen in nature? Like, do bees in a hive or wolves in a pack have liberty? Boy, that's a great question. I think the best answer is to say that they certainly don't have liberty in the same sense humans do. We are different from every other creature in the sense that we have minds that can think for themselves. We can contemplate things like, what do I want to do in 20 years? As far as we know, bees in a hive aren't thinking of the next couple of seconds. They're just doing what they're programmed to do. But we humans have the capability to rationalize, to think through. And so that gives us the ability to exercise that is really a facet of liberty. I think bees in a hive, as far as we know, maybe science will prove otherwise, but I think as far as we know, bees in a hive pretty much do as they're programmed to do. And there's not a day when a bee says, I think I'm tired of being a worker. I'd like to be something else. I don't think they have that capability. And probably that's largely true of wolves as well. Second question, when bad things happen, how do you stay positive and grateful while also being honest about your situation? Oh, another great question. I have been influenced over the years by the philosophy of Stoicism. Other influences too, my parents, I'm a Christian, so Christianity accounts for a lot with me, but the philosophy of the Stoics, people like its founders, Zeno, an ancient Greek, or Cicero in ancient Rome, Seneca, also ancient Rome. And the Stoics are often misunderstood as people who are like Spock in Star Trek, who never have any emotions. That's not really the case. Stoics have emotions, but they keep them under control. Stoics, right from the start, recognize that, yeah, bad things do happen, and they happen to me. And if they were in any way even partly caused by me, well, then I certainly want to do something about that. But a lot of bad things happen that are not in any way caused by me. Stoics say, don't fret over it. Don't let it drag you down. Accept it and move ahead. Ask yourself such questions as, how can I mitigate that in the future? How can I seize an opportunity that might be there? How can I help others avoid the negative thing that happened to me? How can I make the best of my situation is basically what it comes down to. So a very good book on this, well, actually, any book by a current author named Ryan Holiday is perfect. He's the preeminent Stoic philosopher of our day, and he writes in a way that anybody can understand. And one of my favorites of his is a book called Lives of the Stoics. And each chapter is a short biography of famous Stoic people in the past, from Marcus Aurelius to Cicero. And you'll come away from that book appreciating, I think, what the Stoics stood for. They really teach us how to get through a life that is always going to be buffeted by some bad things. Just how do you turn that around? Okay, third question. Do you think that we can balance freedom with safety, as this tends to be the question during times like war? Yeah, it really is. And it's in wartime that often our freedoms are sacrificed, sometimes just temporarily, other times permanently. And it's always been a delicate balance, and I cannot precisely prescribe the measures needed in every conceivable situation. I just err on the side of freedom. And I demand anybody who wants to take some of my freedom in the name of safety to prove it first and tell me something about what's the end game? Where are we headed? Are you ever going to give it back? what is the situation by which you will acknowledge that it's time to give me my freedom back? I'd put a time limit on it. But you're right, freedom and safety in a dangerous world is a delicate balance. And in one sense, we're always balancing that. I mean, we allow ourselves to be taxed to some degree for things like national defense. And we might say, well, if government's going to take my money, that means less freedom for me. Well, but if it spends it well, and it really does defend you from those who would assault your freedom and your independence, take your life perhaps, well, then it's a good investment. But I guess my best advice is to err on the side of freedom before swallowing any promise of safety at the expense of freedom. Remember what Benjamin Franklin said. He said that, I want to get it exactly right here. Those who give up essential freedom for security will ultimately end up with neither. So he recognized there was a balance there, but he would put more of a demand on those who argue for less freedom than those who would argue for more. Okay, let's see, next question. If liberty and character are good, why do so many people take away liberty and have bad character? There are a lot of reasons for that. Some people have simply decided that they don't need to respect you and your property, and they don't feel accountable if they don't. And they may be thinking in a very short-term sense that, hey, if I steal from this guy, I'll benefit. Look how rich I can become if I just steal from a bunch of people. Well, that may be true in the short run. You may be better off because you've stolen something in the very short run. But in the long run, you may very well be caught and end up sacrificing your life or liberty because of it. And at the very least, if you're a person of any character at all, your conscience, you've got to live with it, and it's going to weigh on you. But a lot of people, they don't learn this early in life. And so they start out life maybe going down a bad path. And we've all seen people like that who never seem to learn the value of character. So they end up in and out of jail. Nobody wants to be near them because they're such rotten people. You just have to decide you don't want to live like that, and that other people have a right to live in the absence of that. So you're not going to be a burden on them either. That's how I would answer that. You'd really have to come down to each and every person. If you know a person who is eager to take away liberty or who have bad character, and if you have an opportunity to question them, don't try to lecture at them. Actually ask them questions like, have you thought about the long run consequences of what you're doing? Have you considered the fact that you're setting yourself up for failure? It'd be interesting. It'd be a learning experience, I think, to be able to question such people. I've had that occasion from time to time with students who misbehaved in the classroom or neighbors who I thought could have been a lot more neighborly. And I've never felt that sacrificing your character for anything is, in the long run, really worth it. Where will this recording go, and where can I find more fee webinars? Thanks. Hannah, are you able to answer that? Will this go on the NSHSS site, perhaps?
Yes, so this will also be on our YouTube channels, and it'll also be on our past webinars list.
Okay. I hope that is helpful. Thank you for doing that. Are there any other questions? Oh, maybe they've heard enough from me. Well, let me just wrap it up then by saying once again, a hearty thank you to Hannah at NSHSS for arranging this, the third webinar that we've done. And thanks to all of you for taking time out to listen. I hope you'll come away thinking, wow, there's something there that I can put to good use and make my life in some way better. That's my hope. So if there are no other questions, Hannah, I guess I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Larry. It's been wonderful. I also wanted to remind everyone to leave feedback for Fee if you have the chance before the webinar is over or right after. Thank you.
Absolutely. And visit the FEE website, fee.org. I have a website as well, lawrencewreed.com, where I put everything that I write. I have a great section on quotes from people past and present and other good stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you, Hannah.